In 1999, Audi Sport entered for the first time into the 24 Hours of Le Mans, bringing two brand new prototypes, the open-top LMP Audi R8R and the R8C Coupe, into the LMGTP class. Ultimately, by the finish, the R8R would bring home a third and fourth overall, while the R8C was unreliable and dropped out in the early hours of the race. After this, Audi Sport decided to drop the LMGTP entry and continued with the R8R, redeveloping it into the R8 LMP 900 that would go on to such dominance in prototype racing around the world. In 2006, Audi would retire their trusty R8 and introduce the diesel-powered R10 TDI powered by a V12 twin-turbo diesel engine. While there was diesel-powered cars in the past, this was the first to be successful, taking Sebring, Le Mans, and Petit Le Mans in 2006. In 2007, the previously unchallenged R10 would go up against a newcomer from Peugeot and their V12 908 HDI FAP. While the R10 was built like a traditional LMP1, the Peugeot was more compared to as a Formula One car with fenders and a cockpit. After a year with teething issues, the 908 became a sharp weapon for Peugeot, and in 2008 was consistently far ahead of its aging counterpart from Audi. The gap was none more visible than at the marquee race at the 24 Hours of Le Mans, with Peugeot being 3 seconds a lap faster. While Audi did win, it was only because of the R10 having superior reliability, but the search for straight line speed would lead them in a direction far from the tried and true R10 and R8s of the past. This is the story of the successor of the R10. This is the story of the Audi R15 TDI. The first design work for the up-and-coming R15 was started in January 2008. Around the same time, work began on the new V10 diesel engine that would power it. The engine's creator, Wolfgang Boretsky, stated the engine's architecture was similar to the previous R10's V12, however smaller and lighter, with differences in the engine's bore and stroke, but maintained the 90-degree bank angle. As for the exterior of the car, this one would leave behind conventional designs of the past in favor for a more Formula One car with fenders design, similar to the 908 that they were trying to beat. Another diversion from the past designs was the channeling of air through the car to create downforce. At the time, this was a taboo for sports cars and only appeared to be an expensive endeavor with little performance payoff. The radiators were pushed forward, allowing for very unconventional side pod that would assist in the channeling of air through the car and add more aerodynamic downforce. Another change to the car was the rear wing. For 2009, it was shorter than in previous years due to new regulations for LMP1 cars, where it went from 2 meters to 1.6 meters. However, Audi opted with a new swan neck design to support the new rear wing, similar to the Acura ARX-02 competing in the American Le Mans series. The theory behind this design was, as opposed to a more conventional wing, is to reduce turbulence on the underside of the wing. Another design feature was the twin crash structures of the nose, allowing a small air channel in the middle of the nose to divert air over the car. The twin crash structure ran opposed to the single crash structure of the R8 and R10, which made the nose significantly wider in comparison, but also thought to be safer in the event of an accident. The nose also featured a raised brow and a large opening between the brow and the splitter. The wheelbase was also lengthened to help spread the weight of the car and help improve rear tire degradation, which was a reoccurring issue on the R10. However, these changes actually worsened the tire wear and prevented the R15 from double stinting the tire at any given time. The biggest departure from previous cars was the R15 was completely computer designed. Whereas the predecessors had been hand-drawn by the engineers, the R15 was completely computer designed and tested. When the rubber hit the road, everything they knew about the car at that point was a hypothetical, outside of the few 50% scale models that were wind tunnel tested. The 2009 12 Hours of Sebring was to be the debut race for the Audi R18. As well as an updated 908 from Peugeot, it would also feature two Acura ARX-02 LMP1s to complement the two diesel manufacturers. In qualifying, the Acura from DeFerrin Motorsports managed to grab pole to the surprise of everybody, as everybody had favored the two diesel manufacturers. However, at the start, the number 2 Audi stormed past the pole-sitting DeFerrin Acura before turn 1, followed soon after by the number 07 Peugeot. As the race started to play out, the Audi slipped behind the Peugeots due to their inability to double stint tires, a feat the Peugeot was able to consistently accomplish. The primary reason to this being so crucial was because in Le Mans rules, you are not allowed to change tires until refueling is complete. Each tire change costed the Audis about 20 seconds per 2 pit stops. As the race approached midway, the leading number 08 Peugeot suffered a spin, and the sister number 07 Peugeot suffered a cockpit cooling issue which swiftly took it out of contention. As the race approached two-thirds distance, the Audis were finally able to double stint their tires, aided by the fact that around the same time, the leading number 08 Peugeot suffered from a puncture. The R15 was finally able to leap into the lead. However, the lead was not by much. In the closing stages, the number 2 Audi of Alan McNish and number 08 Peugeot of Frank Montagny traded the lead back and forth, and in the end, the Audi was able to claim the win after a shorter final pit stop for fuel. The winning Audi covered 1,417 miles with an average speed of 117.9 miles per hour, both to that point event records. The triumph at Sebring gave everybody a false sense of hope for this car as it descended into Sebring immortality like its two predecessors before it. The buildup to Le Mans 2009 was different than in years past. Due to economic concerns stemming from the global recession faced at the time, the traditional test day 2 weeks prior to the main race was cancelled in favor of a single 6-hour practice session before qualifying. After Sebring, Audi had heavily revised their R15 competitor to include an updated nose, new intercooler inlets on the side pods, and a slightly reshaped rear wing. The 6-hour practice was heavily impacted by rain, which hurt many of the competitors because the data collected from the test was mostly useless, as the race called for dry weather the entire way through. The 3 Audis managed to set faster times than the 3 Peugeots, but in rain-affected conditions, this had very little indication for how the race would go. Most of the attention during the Wednesday practice was not on the track itself, but the politics being played off the track. By the end of the practice day, Peugeot would launch an official protest with the Le Mans organizers, the ACO. In the protest, the Peugeot team stated that the nose of the R15 was illegal, and the basis for this protest stemmed from a small piece of carbon fiber channeling inwards on the outer nose openings of the R15. Le Mans rules state that you must not be able to see the suspension when looking into the car from the front. The nature of the nose of the R15 would allow for such a view of the suspension if it wasn't for the small pieces of carbon fiber. The second part of the protest was that Peugeot claimed that these carbon fiber pieces were meant to be an aerodynamic device, not a legality device, that Audi had claimed it to be. So in the rules, there is a limitation of aerodynamics on the front of the prototypes, which if viewed in a certain way, this small part could be considered in breach of. At the time, the ACO declined to hear the protest because they had oversaw the design process with Audi and viewed the part as legal. Despite this, a hearing was set up after the Le Mans race itself to hear the Peugeot's protest, a protest that would be withdrawn after the race. In qualifying, the number 1 Audi of Alan McNish went out early and set a lap time of 3 minutes 23 seconds .6 before returning to run race simulations due to the lack of practice time from the rain-affected session earlier in the week. The other 2 Audis lost the majority of their time in the pits with mechanical issues, only managing a 6th and 7th place starting position on the grid. Peugeot was able to grab a pole with a lap time of 3 minutes 22 seconds .8, 7/10 ahead of the second place Audi of McNish. Peugeot would also line up 3rd, 4th, and 5th, 4th place coming from the privately entered 2008 Peugeot from Audi Sport. The 2009 24 Hours of Le Mans started with all the pomp and circumstance that we have all grown accustomed to through the years. At the start, the number 8 Peugeot took over the lead from pole position over the number 1 Audi of Alan McNish. Despite an early charge from McNish, the Audi gradually fell back into the grasp of the chasing 3 Peugeots. In the early laps, Audi got a rather rude awakening. The car that they had designed, spent all this money and time with, to compete with Peugeot directly was, yet again, 3 seconds a lap slower, just like the R10 in the year previous. It would not take long for the first nail in the Audi coffin to be hammered into place, as on lap number 3, the number 3 Audi of Harold Premet crashed going into Indianapolis. He had been trying to overtake one of the new Lola Aston Martins that had gotten around him in the opening laps. To add insult to injury, he had to be towed out of the gravel, which cost him a full racing lap before he can even get going back to the pits to receive a new nose and clean radiators. Meanwhile, on the track, the 2 unhindered Audis started experiencing handling issues of their own. Because of the lack of testing and dry running, the Audi camp was not able to complete a proper setup that was able to withstand the dry conditions of Le Mans. They were forced to take a semi-blind swing at the cars, and ultimately this hurt the race pace and efficiency of the two remaining Audis. It wasn't long, though, before Peugeot would also start experiencing issues as the number 7, driven by Pedro Lamy, was hit by a customer Pescarolo Peugeot in the pit lane, causing a flat tire. Pedro was forced to limp his wounded 908 the full 8 miles back to the pit lane, where the rear end of the 908 disintegrated with the flailing tire. At the end of the first hour, it was 2v2, however, the advantage was still well in Peugeot's court. As the race ticked on into the late afternoon and early evening, the number 8 Peugeot steadily grew its lead over the sister number 9 and the two Audis. The number 8 would also run into issues with a loss of drive in one of its rear wheels, costing it a 7-minute or 2-lap trip to the garage for repairs, handing the lead to the twin sister, the number 9, and second and third to the remaining Audi duo. As day turned into night, the number 2 Audi of Lucas Luhr crashed heavily going into the Porsche curves, causing heavy rear end damage. Despite his best efforts to get the car back on only one drive wheel, he was ultimately forced to park the car by the marshals and faced retirement. That made it only one Audi versus 2 healthy Peugeots. The sister number 3 Audi had to make an over 1 hour trip to the garage where the entire engine had to be pulled off the car to rectify a fuel injection issue. At this point, the number 3 car was just around to gain mileage on the car and get valuable data to be used on the number 1 that was still very much in the fight. The number 1 had a clean race to that point, with the exception of having to replace a nose that had been damaged during an earlier safety car. However, this car would also start to falter like its twin sisters. Initially, they would have to clean out the radiators at every pit stop, but this issue evolved into the night as the car would have to be put into the garage to do a proper cleansing to prevent the car from overheating, thus allowing the number 8 Peugeot to make up the 2 laps it was down and casting the sister 9 Peugeot further adrift and out of reach. The 1 Audi and 8 Peugeot would briefly battle around the Circuit de la Sarthe for second place on track before the inevitable pass came and repositioned the number 1 Audi to third place, where it would stay. As the 2009 24 Hours of Le Mans drew into its final stages, any hope for an Audi victory was soon dashed. The number 3 Audi that had had the most issues throughout the race continued to have issues and off-track excursions. Multiple trips to the garage saw it end up being fated as one of the final classified cars in the field. The number 1 Audi that had been relatively consistent but still plagued with issues continued to have overheating issues and required trips to the garage to blow out the radiators. Ultimately, a gear shift linkage failure would put the final nail in the coffin for Audi at Le Mans in 2009. At the end of the race, the number 9 Peugeot of David Brabham, Marc Genet, and Alexander Wurz would take the victory with 382 laps completed. 1 lap adrift from them was the twin sister, the number 8 Peugeot of Frank Montagny, Sebastian Bourdais, and Stefan Sarrazin. 6 laps behind the overall winner came home the number 1 Audi of Tom Christensen, Alan McNish, and Dindo Capello. Despite their best efforts, this is the best result that they could manage, and ultimately would continue Audi's streak of sitting on the podium every year at Le Mans since 1999. However, it was not the position that they wanted to be in at the end of the race. The third race of the R15 came at the penultimate race for the American Le Mans Series at the Petit Le Mans. Once again, we would see 2 Audis versus 2 Peugeots in another endurance battle. The true test of this race would be the weather, and after qualifying, the hopes of Audi were once again dim as the pole-sitting Peugeot was a full 1.3 seconds clear on the first Audi positioned in third place. The race was hindered the entire way through by rain, which was a positive for the Audi team, as they had historically fared better than their French counterparts in inclement weather. As the race played out, the Audis had a slight advantage in the wet weather. However, this all came undone around lap 180 when the weather further deteriorated and both Audis spun in the same spot on the same lap, handing the lead to Frank Montagny and the number 8 Peugeot. On lap 184, the race was red flagged due to the conditions. The race would never restart, handing Peugeot its second major endurance win of the year and leaving the R15 1 for 3 on victories. The Audi R15 proved to be a big failure on Audi's part. It only had a 33% winning average in the 3 races that it competed in. As a comparison, the R10 boasted an almost 50% win record across its 46 races, and the R8 was even more impressive with a 78% win record across its 80 races. The end of the 2009 season spelled the end for the R15 in its original form. For 2010, it was overhauled by the engineers who took the tub of the car and hand designed the rest from there on, like it had done with the R8 and R10. The updated car got rid of the radical side pods in favor of a more conventional design, and the nose was updated, exposing the twin crash structures, as well as covering the gap between the brow and the splitter, eliminating the grounds for future protests from competitors, which hindered it in 2009 during the Le Mans race weekend. The further updates also repositioned the radiators to help with cooling, and the powertrain remained mostly the same. The 2010 LMP1 regulations were released in November 2009, which caused much of the new R15 Plus to have to be redesigned for a second time. And unlike in 2009, the R15 Plus would undergo a rigorous testing program. Audi Sport even decided to skip the 2010 12 hours of Sebring in favor of conducting a 36-hour private test. In the first two races of the 2010 season, the R15 Plus managed to win over the competing Peugeots that they were up against. But Audi hadn't invested all of the money and resources to win at Spa. They were there for Le Mans. And at Le Mans, the Peugeots were once again quicker, but the gap was closer than in previous years. This time only 2 seconds a lap off the pace, though Peugeot did manage a 1-2-3-4 lockout. In the race itself, the Audi trio were separated from the Peugeots early on during a safety car period, which set them essentially a half a lap back from the leading quartet, and they would eventually fall a full lap back. However, this time there was no mechanical issues. This time around, it was the Peugeots that would falter. The number 3 Peugeot fell early to a suspension mounting breaking off from the chassis. Ironically, it was the winning chassis from 2009. Later on in the race, the longtime leading number 2 Peugeot fell in an extravagant style, exiting the race in a ball of flame and smoke out of the exhaust, handing the lead to the number 9 R15 that was only 1 lap back at the time. As the clock ran down, the 2 remaining Peugeots would also expire in the same way, in a ball of smoke and fire, handing a podium sweep to the R15 Pluses from Audi Sport Team Yost. The R15 is not favorably viewed in hindsight. It is seen as the beginning of the end for the Audi LMP1 program, and in a way this is true. Towards the end of their run in the WEC, Audi was willing to try radical designs and sacrifice their trademark reliability and serviceability for outright speed, a sacrifice that would cost them several times in the final years of the R18 program. The R15 TDI's spot in history is mostly forgotten compared to the legacy of the R8 and R10 and its successor, the R18. The R15 is an outlier for its lack of success and extremely short lifespan. It was a car meant to push the boundaries of an LMP1 of the time, but it fell flat on its face when it counted the most. It's easy to criticize some of the decisions now, but then the circumstances were very different. I think given more time in development, it could have become a successful race car, but in the end, and in reality, it still fell short. In 2011, the R15 program was wrapped up and a new close-cockpitted R18 debuted, which ushered in a new era of success for Audi, until finally in late 2016, the plug was pulled altogether, during the fallout of the Volkswagen Dieselgate saga. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. I know this is a different kind of video than we're used to, but I think sports car racing is one of the more fascinating forms of history and motorsports to follow because of the evolution through time. And honestly, I had a lot of fun putting this video together. A lot of research and, a lot of time did go into this. I do want to thank Mr. Brad Kettler for some of the information that he provided about the R15 that really did assist in the making of this video. And definitely, I hope to do some more of these videos. Keep in mind, this one was not perfect. It was never intended to be perfect. This is my first attempt at making something like this. So, I definitely welcome your critiques in the comments below. But definitely, I do thank you all so very much for tuning in. And as always, peace out. Oh, wait. I forgot to say, since it's my line, I forgot to say ahoy in this video. So ahoy, and also peace out. Thank you so much, guys. And again, leave your comments and criticisms in the comments below. Thank you. Bye. Have a beautiful time.